All right, so let's talk about extraneous solutions and that possibility where when you check, you don't get a solution that works. So here's a problem where we have 6 over x minus 3 equals 8x squared over x squared minus 9 minus 4x over x plus 3. So the first thing is to look at our denominators because we want the lowest common denominator. And if you look here, x squared minus 9, I've got to simplify that because otherwise I'm going to make my denominator harder and more complicated than it needs to be. When I realize that I can factor this, x squared minus 9 is the difference of two squares. It's x plus 3 times x minus 3. Now I notice something. Hey, my x plus 3 is common and my x minus 3 is common, so the only thing I need for my least common denominator is both of those, x minus 3 times x plus 3. So now, remember, we multiply everything by our least common denominator. So you multiply everything by x minus 3 times x plus 3, each of these three pieces. Go ahead and do that and see what you simplified to. So when I multiply, the x minus 3's cancel, and I'm left with 6 times x plus 3 equals. Over here, the entire denominator cancels, and you're left with 8x squared minus. Over here, my x plus 3's cancel, so I have x minus 3 times 4x. So now multiply, distribute. 6 times x plus 3 is 6x plus 18. When we distribute over here, we get 4x squared minus 12x. Remembering that there's a minus in front, and I still have to distribute that to change those signs. So that turns into negative 4x plus 12. And now, because I have a quadratic, I need everything equal to 0. So subtract 6x from both sides and subtract 18 from both sides, giving us this entire quadratic equation, 4x squared plus 6x minus 18. Okay, now from here, this is stuff we've done and we have been practicing like crazy. We have to factor this. So go ahead and try to factor it, get one step ahead. So we have to look at the three factors. Ooh, I have a greatest common factor. I can divide everything by 2, so that 2 comes out front. Then I have 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. And this is where we do our fancy slide and divide trick. What multiplies to negative 18 and adds to 3. So you look at your factors, and 6 and 3 would work. So you plug them in. 3 has to be negative and 6 has to be positive. Big thing we forget to do is to divide by 2. And then that turns into right here. So in factored form, it's 2 times 2x minus 3 times x plus 3. And then from here, we solve, right? We add 3, we divide by 2, and you get 3 halves. Here, you subtract 3, and you get x equals negative 3. And that looks like your two solutions. This is usually where we would circle. But I'm telling you that one of these won't work. Maybe both, but I'm telling you one won't. So you've got to plug them in. And that's the hard part because our original, if you look back, if you remember, it's this over here. This is our entire original. You have to plug in 3 halves, this fraction, into each piece. And then again, you have to plug in negative 3 into each x. I shouldn't say piece, each x. So I'll show you how we do that, and you can absolutely use a calculator to help you. You're plugging in 3 halves for wherever there's an x. And then from there, use the calculator, plug in each piece at a time. And it does become a true statement after you do the math. You end up getting, this is the farthest I went before I checked with the calculator, 6 over negative 3 halves equals 18 over negative 27 fourths minus 6 over 9 halves. And then when you do the math of this part, using parentheses to be really clear, it does work. So 3 halves is totally a solution.
Not that one.
So let's see why negative 3 is not. So when you plug in negative 3, and for x, you end up getting, and if you can see up here, so I'm plugging in negative 3 in all the places where there's an x. So negative 3 minus 3 in the denominator, 6 over negative 6, that's negative 1, all good there. Over here, if I multiply negative 3 squared, that's 9 times 8 is 72. Uh-oh, down here. Negative 3 squared is 9. 9 minus 9 is 0. Over here, same idea. You get negative 12 over negative 3 plus 3. That's 0. And now we have to remember our fact that you can't divide by 0. So this is called extraneous. So x cannot equal negative 3. And the only answer is 3 halves.